Hey, it's Jim, and this is level 3 of the CFA program, a constructed response set on the topic of the private market pathway and the learning module on working with the wealthy. I'm going to go out on a limb, but it's a pretty sturdy limb here. And although we never know what the Institute is thinking, I'm going to go ahead and give you a near guarantee. I can't give you a guarantee, but a near guarantee that this learning module is going to show up on the exam. Clearly, if I were making up the exam, I would test you on this material. Let me just remind you, since the very beginning of level 1, I have emphasized the need and the importance of understanding and being able to craft the policy statement. So up to this point, we've done lots of good work on, all the constraints and the risk of return objective and asset allocation. But now we get into the high net worth and the ultra high net worth clients, and there's some extra stuff that's going to influence the constraints and maybe allocation and maybe the risk and return objective. So while this learning module is called Working with the Wealthy, it could also be called something like, hey, here's all the extra stuff that you need to know. So look at these LOSs, human dynamics, unique characteristics, appropriate approaches. So I'm going to go ahead and emphasize that what you need to do, and by the way, those of you who looked at this learning module, it's 1,000 pages long. But I'm going to go ahead and recommend that you work through the 2 or 3 family businesses that they have inside of the document, and then there's 3 or 4 really good cases at the end. Couple that with what we're going to do here, and that should prepare you for the questions that you're going to see on this exam. Now, before we get to this case, Raj Patel, I'm going to go ahead and do something that I only do a handful of times when working through these slide decks. I want to go through the questions first, and then we'll go back and we'll take a look at the Patel family business, who has an offer in the hundreds of millions of dollars to sell that particular business. But I want to give you some background for each of these questions, so that you might want to do is, once we cover this particular slide, and before we go back over the actual case details, you might want to pause and go back and take a look at some of the contents of this learning module. Question 1, identify 3 key family dynamics. So this is what's going to happen on the exam. At least it makes perfect sense. And this is what the Institute is signaling with all of these practice examples inside of the learning module. It's not just a husband and a wife or a married couple. It's a married couple, and then parents, and then children, and then aunts and uncles, and cousins, and brothers, and all sorts of people in there. So we're going to have to sift through those family dynamics and ask ourselves the question, okay, how is this going to impact each of those different elements inside of the policy statement? Question 2, cultural dimensions. So notice that we have 3 of them here. I want you to go back and look at I'm pretty sure it's exhibit 4 in the learning module, and there are 3 other of these cultural dimensions. There's one about cultural indulgence versus restraint. There's one on masculinity versus femininity. There's one on collectivism. And so, there it is, individualism and collectivism. And so there's one on avoidance, uncertainty avoidance or risk avoidance. I forget what the exact name is, but I want you to go back and take a look at those 6 cultural dimensions, because while we only ask 3 of them here, you need to be prepared for all 6 of them. And so note, the question is, analyze how each of the dimensions impacts the family situation and probably impacts the dynamics over back there in question 1. Question 3, look at this one, appropriate governance structure. So go back to the beginning of this learning module where there's the family constitution. Do you remember some of the contents of a family constitution, like the vision or a mission statement, some kind of values, family business policies, wealth management, conflict resolutions. There's all sorts of stuff in there, but there's one section on governance structure. So you're going to have to answer questions about, do we need a family council? Who should be on the family council? How often should the family council meet? What's the decision-making process? I'll just pick some names here. Does Betty get 20% vote? Does Johnny get 30% vote? Does Bobby, what that kind of a dynamic is. So the governance structure, how does that impact the entire policy statement? And then question 4, what are some unique characteristics that the Patel family, because they have become, or they're on the verge of becoming, an ultra high net worth client? And notice the question asked you to compare with regular old traditional high net worth clients. So feel free to continue this recording or pause and go back and spend, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 100 minutes, 7 hours, whatever it is that you need. But let me go ahead and re-emphasize how important that we think that this learning module is. All right, so let's go ahead and find out about Raj. 68 years old. That may or may not be important. It's not too terribly important in this one, although there's one item that we need to worry about. Raj is age. But clearly, if the Institute gives you a client that's, say 88 years old or 38 years old, well, then, you got the dynamics of, that vast difference in ages. Specialty pharmaceutical store, cross Midwest, started this all the way back 1985. Were you guys even born in 1985? Probably not. 75 stores. All right, so this is important. Known for personalized service, specialization in diabetes care, supplies, and education. That's going to become an issue when we go back to the governance structure and maybe some of those cultural dimensions. All right, so here's a little bit about the dynamics. All right, so the wife is a doctor, independent medical practice while helping diabetes education programs. All right, so there's a link back here from her professional career back to the family business. 3 children, 38, 35, and 32. And so wouldn't it be nice if the list were 3 children or 4 children or however many it was, and the sentence read, hey, everybody agrees on the same thing. But that's not going to probably be the case. So notice that these 3 children, they're all pretty talented, right? There's an MBA, consulting firm, there's a pharmacist, there's a law degree, no interest in pharmacy, but focuses on the real estate acquisitions. So we have clearly 3 independent children. They're probably independently wealthy, but they still have a stake in the family business, but they're probably could do well on their own. All right, so here's this acquisition offer that I was telling you about. So $280 million. While the offer is compelling, of course, $280 million, that should be compelling. Revealed complex dynamics. All right, so one of the children advocates accepting the offer. One of the children strongly opposes the offer, and the younger one appears non-committal, but is concerned about those real estate opportunities. So during family gatherings, there's a mediator between the 2 opposing views. So think about what that means under the cultural dimensions and the governance structure. Do we need a family council to have an official mediator inside of this body, right? She notes that their weekly family dinners once centered around, and you can imagine they're all happy, right? Sharing business successes, they're all happy. And now end intense discussions, and Raj has started leaving these discussions early, citing fatigue. I mean, after all, the dude is 68 years old. I'm only 63 years old, but I would be completely stressed out about this if my family was arguing about the business. All right, further complicated by Chicago's tight-knit Indian American business community. So this links back to those cultural dimensions. Remember, there were 6 of them. We're only going to have to look at 3. A model of immigrant entrepreneurial success. Okay, prominent business leader. This makes sense. But look at this. He's worried about selling, abandoning this leadership role. Adding another layer of complexity. So we've got a husband there, so a son-in-law, financial analyst, so it could be you or me, right? Regularly offers unsolicited advice. Oh my gosh. So this is what I would do about unsolicited advice. I would just go like this. No formal role in the business. There's an engagement to Sophie, whose family owns a competing regional pharmacy chain. So here we go. This is like a soap opera, right? So that's what I think the Institute is going to ask you on the exam. Here's a soap opera. Let's try to figure it out. And of course, these are the most fun clients to deal with, all of these different challenges. And not least of which is the simple fact that this is not going to be something that you're going to do over 1 week's time. This is a lifelong commitment to this client. All right, so let's start with question number 1. So 3 key family dynamics that could impact, the entire policy statement, but particularly that decision-making process. So what you can do is go back to the learning module, and there are a whole bunch of different family dynamics in one of those. I think it's in an earlier exhibit. So intergenerational leadership transition. That makes perfect sense. So if Raj decides to exit, if he decides to retire, if he decides something else, well, that might delay a decision, that might impact a decision. Here's this competing professional identities that I was talking about just earlier. So while we have a pharmacist, right, and we have diabetes, and we have competing, so there's all sorts of stuff going on in here. Notice the bottom of this sentence here: complicating evaluations beyond financial considerations. And then finally, the son-in-law, external family influences. I don't think you can take a picture of yourself with your ears covered and submit that as part of your exam, but you might want to say something like fragmenting family unity, decision paralysis, rushed choices. I would be tempted, even though the learning module doesn't write about this too much. And by the way, there is a great section inside of this learning module on behavioral finance. We've talked about all this since level 1, level 2, and now level 3. There's disposition effect, there's fragmenting and confirmation bias, all those kind of good things. Make sure you go through those and be ready to be tested on those. I would be tempted here to have an answer, and I think this is probably reasonable, is to say something like, hey, maybe there are behavioral issues going on here that's going to lead us to maybe some irrational decisions. Irrational, not in the traditional rational sense of, the founding fathers of finance, going back to Harry Markowitz. All right, question 2. Here are the cultural dimensions. So let's focus on these 3. Let's do this in a separate paragraph. So power distance. So what this means is, what is the distance between, somebody up here? So this is Raj, he's the dad and he's the founder, and he's 68. So that indicates, a high power distance, 68. It's not always just math and age difference. What was that? 68 down to 32. What was Neil? He was 32 as the youngest. But his reluctance in making this decision and allowing the family members to contribute probably suggests something like, well, he's not going to make this decision and say, what, I'm deciding and you guys figure it out. So we'll use the term, there's a egalitarian decision making, which is, we all have an equal vote. How about individualism versus collectivism? Well, go back to those several sentences about not only Raj's public role in the community, but also his attitude. Wasn't one of those sentences said something like, Raj worries about abandoning that community. And so we need to worry about that collectivism versus individualism. Notice what we have emphasized there, balancing personal aspirations and community obligations. So note the question just reads to analyze this, not offer a solution, but to analyze. And then long-term versus short-term. I would be very tempted to say something like, Raj being 68 and being around for a super long time, right, doing and being very successful, would be able to convince family members that, hey, this is super important for us to focus on the long term. In fact, he can use his age and say, I'm 68, I'm not going to be around forever. You guys need to embody what I have learned over my life and focus on long term. But clearly, we talk about this online competition, that short-term focus on one of the children. So go ahead and mention those. I think that's good. All right, here are those corporate governance structures. So what do we recommend? An appropriate structure. So what are we going to do? All right, so what did I mention at the introduction? Do we need a family council? So clearly there's a family council, and clearly there's a need for an advisory board. So we're going to recommend, so let's go ahead and put all the family members in this board, and then let's go ahead and ask some other people, some independent advisors in the various kinds of industries that are related. And, what did we mention? Healthcare, real estate, and community rules. And those are probably three really good ones, but, there's no reason to not have somebody who's prominent in the community that might be a lawyer, might be an accountant. Maybe there's some religious leaders in the community. I think those are all appropriate answers. So what are these key responsibilities? Let's go back to the family constitution. What was the first thing? What is the vision? Let's have a mission statement. So the key responsibility, the initial one, would be let's go ahead and write a mission statement that reflects all of the values. And whatever those values are, we don't really know much about it, but notice what we're saying, next generation education, conflict resolution, community relationships. You might throw in a code of conduct in there. I always am fascinated when I read about somebody who behaves poorly. There was a recent football game where an NFL football game where a fan was seen shouting obscenities at another fan from the opposing team. Somebody recorded it, of course, and then they identified this person, and who knows what's going to happen. So remember, code of conduct, professional behavior of all of the individuals on this family council. And then, of course, we're going to need some kind of an investment committee that is probably responsible for hiring wealth managers out there. So we'll call that with professional management. And this makes perfect sense. So this investment committee inside, let me go back here real quick. Inside of this family council, maybe several family members know something about investing in stocks and bonds. And what those family members will be able to do as part of the investment committee is be able to convey those family values and aspirations and all that kind of stuff to potential wealth advisors and wealth management firms out there so that they can hire the appropriate group of people. So notice key responsibilities: create and execute, review, tax efficiency, all that good stuff that we've talked about for a long, long time. All right, how about the last one here? Unique characteristics as potential ultra high net worth clients. So we've got multi-jurisdictional considerations. So they have cross-state business holdings, community leadership roles requiring complex tax and legal planning, multi-generational wealth stewardship. So we want to make certain that not only the three children, but those three children, they're going to likely they're going to have children of their own. So you got grandchildren and great-grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, sociocultural wealth implications. So let's go back to those couple of sentences in there about the community in which there's prominent roles that this family probably plays. So we need to write this out, balancing those financial objectives from the business standpoint and then the financial objectives from the family standpoint, as well as what's going to happen inside of the community. And so that takes us through this essay 2 for Raj. Those of you who haven't, paused the video. I want you to go ahead and go and at a minimum, go look at some of those exhibits inside of the learning module, because they'll give you really good details about some of the things we talked about. But then work through those problems. I think there are 4 cases at the end. So hey, thanks for watching. Have a great day and good luck studying.